Michael stood at the front, his golden armor gleaming like a second sun. His sword, forged in celestial fire, crackled with divine energy. The 200 fallen angels stood before him, their once proud wings darkened with sin. "You have broken the sacred laws," Michael declared, his voice shaking the heavens. "You swore an oath, and now you shall face judgment." The fallen shifted uneasily, their defiance wavering. They had once been mighty, but now they felt the weight of their transgressions. Fear seeped into their hearts as the 7 watchers advanced. Gabriel raised his hand, and the air itself trembled at his presence. His eyes burned with righteous fury, locking on to the fallen. "You were entrusted with the mysteries of heaven," he said, "yet you defiled them, sharing forbidden knowledge with mankind. You taught them war, sorcery, and vanity. You turned them against the Creator's design. Now the very earth cries out against you." The fallen clenched their fists, but their strength faltered. Raphael stepped forward, his expression both sorrowful and unyielding. In his hand, he held the chains of heaven, glowing with divine power. He turned to Azazel, the corrupter of men, who had given mortals the knowledge of weapons. "You filled the world with bloodshed," Raphael said, his voice heavy. "You turned men into beasts, thirsty for war and destruction. Your teachings will be erased, and you shall be bound in darkness." The chains surged forward, wrapping around Azazel like living serpents. Azazel struggled, his once great power now useless against divine judgment. The chains burned into his very essence, reducing his strength. He roared in defiance, but his cries carried no power. Raphael lifted him with ease, dragging him toward the abyss. "Your punishment is eternal," Raphael said coldly. "No mercy will be granted to you." Azazel's eyes widened as the ground split open beneath him. The shadows of the abyss rose like hungry creatures, ready to consume him whole. Uriel, the keeper of divine wisdom, unrolled a scroll glowing with celestial fire. "Your sins have been recorded in the book of judgment," he said. "Your corruption spread across the earth, birthing monstrous offspring. The Nephilim defiled creation, consuming all in their path. The flood shall purge them, washing away the filth of your deeds. But you shall not escape so easily." He pointed at the fallen, his gaze piercing. "You will suffer long before the final reckoning." The fallen angels trembled at his words. Raguel gripped his staff, the embodiment of divine justice. His presence was overwhelming, his power undeniable. "You were meant to protect, not destroy," he said, his voice like thunder. "Instead, you sought to rule over those you were meant to serve. You twisted your gifts into weapons of control. The balance must be restored." He slammed his staff into the ground, sending shockwaves through the valley. The fallen staggered, their bodies weakening under the weight of their own sins. Sariel's wings spread wide, blotting out the sky like a storm of judgment. "You thought you could hide from the sight of heaven," he said, "but no darkness is deep enough, no shadow thick enough to conceal your deeds." He raised his hands, and from the sky, chains of light descended. They wrapped around the fallen, tightening with divine strength. The rebellious angels howled in pain, their celestial forms flickering. They could feel their power slipping away. Rimmel's voice was calm, yet carried the weight of finality. "Your arrogance blinded you," he said. "You believed yourselves untouchable, beyond consequence. But the Most High does not forget. Every choice has led you here, to this moment of reckoning." His gaze swept over the fallen, who now looked to each other in desperation. "The pit awaits, and you will not escape it," Remiel concluded. His words shattered the last vestiges of their defiance. Semyasa, the leader of the fallen, clenched his fists. His once magnificent presence now seemed hollow, filled with dread. "We only sought freedom," he argued, his voice lacking conviction. Michael did not waver. "You sought power," he corrected, "and now you have lost everything." Semyasa's wings drooped, his pride crumbling. He had led his brothers into damnation, and now there was no turning back. He had sealed their fate. Gabriel's hand ignited with celestial fire, illuminating the valley. "Your rule over mankind is over," he declared. "You turned them against their Creator, but they will be freed." He gestured toward the sky, where storm clouds gathered. The flood was coming, destined to wash away their influence. "The world will forget you," Gabriel said. Your names will be lost to time. The fallen looked up, realizing their legacy would be erased. Raphael tightened the chains around Azazel, dragging him closer to the abyss. You will be buried beneath the earth, he said. Your voice will never again corrupt the hearts of men. Azazel snarled, but his strength had left him. The ground beneath him crumbled, revealing an endless chasm. Raphael shoved him forward, and Azazel tumbled into the darkness. His screams faded as the abyss swallowed him whole. Uriel raised his hands and fire erupted from the heavens. The earth must be cleansed, he declared. The fallen angels cowered as the sky burned above them. The Nephilim will perish, their unholy lineage erased. He gazed upon the trembling rebels. But you will suffer beyond the flood, he added. Your imprisonment will last until the final days. The fallen let out cries of despair, realizing there would be no end to their torment. Raguel turned to Semjaza, his expression cold. As their leader, your punishment shall be the greatest, he said. You led them into darkness, and now you shall descend into it first. Semjaza's wings shuddered as the chains wrapped around him. He turned to his brothers, but none could save him. Raguel raised his staff, and the ground opened beneath their leader. Semjaza let out one final cry before he fell into the abyss. Sariel's chains tightened around the remaining fallen, their power draining away. You were once among the stars, he said. Now you will rot in the void. The angels wept as they were pulled forward, their resistance meaningless. The abyss gaped open, ready to consume them all. You will not rise again, Sariel said. And with that, they were cast into the darkness, one by one. Remiel looked upon the now empty valley, the echoes of the fallen fading. It is finished, he said. The watchers turned their eyes to the sky, where the storm clouds swirled. The flood was near, the final step in the cleansing of the world. Let us return, Michael said. They had fulfilled their duty, but their watch was never over. The heavens awaited them once more. As the watchers ascended, Gabriel looked back at the earth below. Will mankind remember, he asked. Uriel's gaze did not waver. They will forget, he answered, but the truth will remain, buried beneath time. The sins of the fallen would fade into myth, but some would still hear whispers in the dark. Raphael sighed as he watched the abyss seal shut. They will rise again in some form, he said. Raguel nodded. Evil never truly dies, he agreed. It only waits. The watchers knew that one day corruption would return, and when it did, they would be ready. Sariel stretched his wings, glancing at the storm above. The flood will do its work, he said. The watchers knew it would cleanse the world of the Nephilim's taint, but mankind would rise again, and with them, new struggles. We will watch, Remiel said, as we always have. The heavens rumbled as the watchers departed, their forms vanishing into light. The valley below was empty, silent. The echoes of the fallen had faded, but their sins had been written into history. And though mankind would forget, the watchers never would. Their duty was eternal. The storm clouds thickened, rolling across the sky like an unrelenting tide. Thunder cracked, shaking the very foundations of the earth. The flood was coming, its waters destined to erase the corruption of the fallen. But even as the first drops fell, the watchers knew that evil would find a way back. This is not the end, Michael said, his voice heavy, only a pause before the next battle. The cycle of defiance and judgment would repeat, as it always had. Gabriel watched the floodwaters begin their descent, swallowing the land below. Mankind will rise again, he said. New nations, new rulers, new choices. Some would follow the light, but others would be drawn to the whispers of darkness. The fallen may be imprisoned, but their influence lingers, Uriel warned. The hearts of men are fragile, easily swayed. The watchers knew that free will could lead to salvation or ruin. It was the burden of mortals to choose. Raphael turned away from the drowning world, his heart heavy. The Most High has given them a path, he said, but they must walk it alone. The watchers could not interfere beyond their duty. They could only observe, only judge when the time was right. We have cast down the rebellious, Raguel said. Now mankind must decide its own fate. The flood would cleanse the earth, but it would not cleanse the hearts of men. Sariel gazed into the heavens, where the stars burned bright and eternal. "We will wait," he said. "We will watch." The Watchers had existed before time itself and would endure until the final days. Their presence would be unseen, but their vigilance would never fade. The fallen were gone, but others would rise in their place. And when they did, the Watchers would be there, standing between heaven and earth,